Welcome to Doing Business in Africa. I'm Sue Birkus, and this time we're in the commercial capital of East Africa, Nairobi, and we're here to find out what it's like doing business in Kenya. Coming up in the show, a look at why, despite a devastating post-election violent outbreak and an economic slowdown, Kenya's tourism sector is poised for growth. We find out how Kenyan companies have managed to dominate trade in the East African region and why localizing your product is key to doing business in Kenya. Record tea prices, how Kenyan companies are profiting from the boom and how some are maximizing profit through value addition. And Kenya's capital markets cleanup, plans for drastic development which could double the market cap by 2012. Then Kenya's booming ICT sector, the opportunities generated by the Seacom fiber optic cable. In 1963, Jomo Kenyatta led his country to independence, aligning the economy with capitalism and the West. This was a departure from a trend to the socialist policies adopted by other newly independent African countries, including Kenya's neighbor, Tanzania, then under the stewardship of Julius Nyerere. A famous meeting between the two leaders highlights the different economic paths the two countries would take, and ultimately who would come out tops. Nyerere said,
"I have heard that you are a man-eat-man society."
And Kenyatta replied,
"And I have heard that yours is a man-eat-nothing society."
Kenya's economy today is the biggest in East Africa, and its economics runs in tandem with its politics. The end of Daniel Arap Moi's 24-year rule in 2002, during which growth slumped to below 1%, saw Kenya enter an era of unprecedented growth under the leadership of President Mwai Kibaki. But the hotly contested elections held 5 years later would show the fragility of the nation's politics, inevitably jolting the country into an ethnic war zone, killing 1,500 people and displacing some 400,000. An inflated coalition government was formed, with Kibaki as president and opposition leader Raila Odinga as prime minister. While this was a necessary political shift, it put pressure on already strained government coffers. This, combined with a global financial crisis and a drought which affected the key agricultural sector, slashed growth to 1.7% in 2008 from its peak of 7% the year before. To reach its 2030 development goal of becoming a middle-income country, Kenya needs to grow by 10% from 2012. The World Bank expects growth to quicken to between 3.5% to 4% this year, still much lower than neighboring countries like Uganda and Tanzania, and far below its potential. And it's the services segment, not the mainstay agricultural sector, which will drive this economy forward.
The one area Kenya is strong, and we highlight that in our report, is services. Kenya has been traditionally known for tourism. That sector has rebounded but hasn't grown substantially or much more than it did in other similar countries over the last years, partly due to the political risks you referred to first. But then Kenya is, to some extent, regional, almost global market leader in some niches of IT, including mobile money. And that was one of the sectors that has seen rapid growth. 77% of Kenyans above the age of 15 now own a mobile phone. And it's possible that within the next 5 years, every Kenyan who wants to have a phone can have one. And for the Kenyans, it's not a luxury item to chat with your friend, but it's actually a development tool that can make a big impact.
In the 5 years leading up to the 2007 presidential elections, Kenya's tourism saw a 50% jump in arrivals, and that year a record 1.8 million tourists visited the country, generating around $1 billion. But in the aftermath of the post-election violence swiftly followed by the global financial crisis, arrivals plummeted by 35%.
In Kenya, whenever our tourism industry has been doing well, for example, in the first 10 years after independence, or for example, in the 3 years up until the elections recently, tourism was doing very, very well, and the economy was also doing very, very well. When tourism declines or stagnates, then the economy also goes down.
Kenya's tourism sector used to be the country's #1 forex earner before the global financial crisis, as well as the post-election violence in 2008. But with aggressive marketing as well as the upcoming FIFA World Cup, this sector is expected to move back up to the #1 spot.
Even though the credit crunch had a big impact on us in the latter part of last year, as it did for other countries, we did begin to see quite a good recovery. One reason was that we had already started doing special offers and had been looking at how we could market our way out of the problems we'd had earlier. And so we were probably quite well placed when the market was beginning to look for added value offers and special deals. We were already offering those. And so I think that in terms of price and value, Kenya stood out.
For sub-Saharan Africa's third biggest airline, Kenya Airways, the country's economic might in the region would prove to be its saving grace. Most people doing business in East Africa tend to make Kenya their entry point.
Now, we as Kenya Airways fortunately haven't been 100% dependent on tourism. I mean, we are diversified quite a bit in terms of our own business. If you look at the transfer traffic that goes through Jomo Kenyatta Airport handled by us is about 70% of our total business. And a lot of the people are businessmen and women. But no doubt, I mean, any that affects tourism does also affect us. So it did affect us. At the moment, we're starting to see numbers going up.
In East Africa, Kenyan companies dominate business. And for Titus Naikuni, a tall man with what seems like not much regard for glass ceilings, an aggressive strategy in a climate where there is much consolidation in the airline industry is the way to go.
I am for it myself, for mergers. But if you look at most of the airlines in Africa, they're owned by governments. Now, we are a private entity ourselves. Government has 23%. So there's more flexibility in private entities getting together than government entities getting together. I think there's a lot of ego at the moment within the industry such that you can't even think of mergers. But to me, that's the way forward, because if you don't have mergers, what's going to happen is you're going to have the European carriers and American carriers merging, and you're going to have big corporations trying to get into Africa, and for us to try and compete with them, it's going to be difficult. Just imagine a merger of Ethiopian Airlines and Kenya Airways. What would you create? I know it's a very sensitive subject, but so be it. I'm saying it.
But while a merger between these airlines might be a bit of a pie in the sky right now, for homegrown Equity Bank, going against critics and proving that money can be made from Kenya's unbanked has paid off. Equity is now the fourth biggest company by market cap on the Nairobi Stock Exchange and holds over half of all bank accounts in the country. Through a major acquisition of Uganda Microfinance in 2008, Equity expanded its unbanked empire to become the third largest branch network in Uganda. While the model worked for Uganda, South Sudan was a whole different ballgame.
Starting off with Uganda, we wanted to experience and explore the possibility of expanding this model using an acquisition style. We were successful to the extent that we took an institution with 80,000 bank accounts, and within a year we had grown that number to over 300,000, and we had been able to scale up outreach by increasing the branch network to 45, the second biggest branch network in Uganda. We thought we were successful to customize this because of similarity in economic situation, the poverty level, the economic activities, the social style of the people at the middle and bottom of the pyramid is similar within the region. When we went to Sudan, the story was very different. There was no acquisition that could be made in Sudan, so it was a greenfield. But the experience there was very, very different in the sense that the elite and even the government was not fully banked. The civil servants were not banked, so we couldn't start at the bottom of the pyramid where the opinion leaders and shapers had not been banked. So we started by sensitizing the opinion shapers to be banked so that we can then use them as agents to advocate for the power.
Kenya's economic dominance has been a thorn in the side of negotiators in the East African community trying to institute free flow of goods across borders and create a common monetary area. While this goal might seem closer to reality now, the concerns are still that this integration is all happening too soon for it to be implemented effectively on a grassroots level, and that Kenyan goods will flood the market, flushing out locally produced products.
First of all, is to ensure that this process does not just remain in the minds and plans of the elites. It has to go down up to the people themselves, so that we don't have a situation where the elites say one word into the press and sign protocols for the sake of media publicity, but when it comes to protecting their own interest, they instruct the officers at the border or the police officers who man roadblocks to do the opposite.
While some may view Kenya's presence with weariness, a hardline attitude is taken by Kenyans themselves when foreign products enter their own market. Kenyans are proud, and SAB Miller found out just how proud. In the late 1990s, the world's largest producer of alcoholic drinks, Diageo, which owns East African breweries, went head-to-head with global brewing giant SAB Miller in what was called the beer war. But Castle left a bad taste in the mouths of Kenyans so used to Tusker, and where every glug was accompanied with a statement, "My country, my beer." In 2002, SAB Miller closed its Castle Lager brewery.
I've been around Southern Africa, and if you go to Botswana, you go to all these places, South African brands pretty much can be dropped right in, you know, that because I think there's a greater community and an identity amongst the Southern Africans. When you come up here to East Africa, I think there is a more an East African identity. You can't just drop your brand in here. And a key example is SAB Miller, who took on EABL. I think that is changing in a way. What I've noticed lately with the MoMA Awards and advertising, there's much more of a sense of an Africanness, right? I meet people who no longer tell me I'm Kenyan, they feel more African. So I think that trend is going to change. There's becoming more homogeneity amongst us all, which is something I'm excited about. But having said that, historically, with the Kenyan market, you've got to be careful. You can't just dump your stuff in here. It's not going to work.
After the break, we explore just how East Africa's largest mobile company, Safaricom, has managed to make big profits from bite-sized products. We also find out some of the challenges facing Kenya's tea and coffee producers, and how Kenya's capital markets are getting a serious spring cleaning, and why your calls could soon be outsourced to Kenya. Kenya's oldest colonial legacy are its tea and coffee industries, two commodities which to a large extent have escaped the global economic meltdown. A drought as well as continued demand are the reasons why companies operating in this sector are seeing profits soar. 3 seasons of failed rains and strong global demand for tea have to a large degree helped to escalate prices to record highs. Towards the end of last year, tea companies like Kapchorua and Williamson saw pre-tax profits more than triple. But poor rains mean less output, which ultimately means lower growth in this sector. And for tea and coffee, output is everything. For listed tea and coffee producer Sasini, majority owned by the Samir Group, the main strategy is to protect its profit margins from external factors, which is why it's focusing on creating value addition products.
You see, for a long time, Sasini was mainly involved in the growing and the marketing of tea and coffee. But then we, in 2007, went into the coffee milling business. And 2 years ago also, we went into the Savannah coffee outlets, which are the added value, where we're able to sell our coffee, tea and coffee products. We normally say from the garden right to the cup. Really to diversify our income and to reduce our dependency on factors beyond our control, like exchange rates, weather, world prices of the commodities. So we really still feel this is the right way to go. And if we can increase our proportion of income from the value-added new businesses, we feel that this is really the right way to go, and we can cushion ourselves against any huge fluctuations which are affected by the factors beyond our control.
For Sasini, power is a production headache. It forms one of the company's biggest input costs. This is a trend across the board when it comes to doing business in Kenya. And for regional cement company Athi River Mining, this is no different.
Our power costs are about 5 times the power costs in Egypt, for example, or if you were to go down in South Africa. Now, it does increase the cost of production because 52% of the cost of production of clinker is energy. And if your energy is 5 times the cost, your cost of production goes up. What does that do to us? As a company, we are competitive in terms of technology. We are efficient in the ways we manufacture, but still we are expensive because we have no control on energy. It makes us more expensive, that's correct, but the only way to compete in the market is to have efficiencies in other sectors, deliver more value to the customers.
Currently, Kenya's energy capacity is around 1,296 megawatts, 2/3 of which is produced by KenGen, the country's main power producer. KenGen plans to spend $5 billion to almost double capacity by 2014. And to do this, it's issued a 10-year bond worth 15 billion shillings, the first corporate bond on the Nairobi Stock Exchange's new automated bond trading system. This, along with government's heavily oversubscribed infrastructure bonds, have highlighted investor interest in the country's 2030 development plans and have led to improved liquidity in the secondary bond market. Its performance was previously stunted by an ineffective manual trading system.
Infrastructure will continue to remain the key focus of our development agenda because, first and foremost, as you've correctly recognized, the spillover effect that we'll have, the ability to create additional jobs, increase disposable income, and hence also act as a stimulus to the rest of the economy. You've talked about the infrastructure bond that we recently issued. That we are very happy with and satisfied with the result of that infrastructure bond. It is the first ever infrastructure bond that has been issued by Kenya and in fact in the region. And it was issued domestically. And it actually led us to understand that there is capital out there that is willing to participate in development, and we've not actually looked into it. These are other revenue lines that we will now be looking at, especially as we go into the new fiscal year, to see how we can increasingly tap on domestic resources to assist government meet its developmental objective and agenda.
The bond market is currently worth over 473 billion Kenyan shillings. Government paper makes up 2/3 of trade. Analysts say this could easily increase to 3 trillion Kenyan shillings by 2013. However, investor appetite for bonds still pales in comparison to interest in the equity market. And in a bid to improve overall liquidity, the industry regulator, the Capital Markets Authority, in association with other industry players, plans to double the market cap by 2012. That would also include demutualizing the Nairobi Stock Exchange.
We want strong institutions that have a strong corporate governance and integrity, and we want that assurance by demutualizing our stock exchange so that they can actually perform their first-line regulatory functions, which will be good, and obviously having a self-regulatory organization that would really be the Nairobi Stock Exchange. So we believe this really will be a win-win situation, and it will obviously create a shareholder value once it's demutualized, because there will be the creation of shares, which is not currently in place, and the shareholders will demand that they get the maximum benefit out of that particular entity, and we believe that will also be a good situation for our market currently, so that we can even realize the dreams of our country of Vision 2030, of increasing our market capitalization by from 50 to 90% by 2012, as well as increasing our bond market as a percentage of GDP to about 30% by, again, year 2012. Those are the two targets we've set out for ourselves.
And if investor interest in the listing of East Africa's most valuable company, Safaricom, is anything to go by, then this looks possible. In what was the most publicized listing in East Africa ever, Safaricom entered the public domain with just about everyone buying shares. And at the heyday of global financial markets, spectacular returns seemed almost a given. But this wasn't to be.
We had a shareholder revolution in Kenya. We have nearly 2 million individual retail shareholders. This is a huge number, and it's well north of what you've got in South Africa. It's an extraordinary sort of Thatcherite type revolution. And I think what happened here was twofold. The retail investors gorged on Safaricom. They all bought far too much, expecting to be able to flip it reasonably quickly. Everybody got caught long and wrong. And I think the trigger for the retail investors to troop back into the market is once we cross 5 on Safaricom. With foreign investors, clearly, they exited as fast as they could. They checked out once they saw all the troubles happening. But in the last few months, It is the foreign investors who've been buying the Nairobi Stock Exchange. For example, Safaricom now has 16% foreign investors compared to 11% not so long ago. So it is those folks who've actually picked up the slack.
Safaricom, formerly state-owned, did reach its initial public offer price of 5 Kenyan shillings towards the end of last year, but analysts say the market is undervaluing one of the region's most promising growth stories. The company practically pioneered the mobile banking space with its M-Pesa service, and now it's offered the same service to Kenyans living abroad who want to send small amounts of money back home.
Our M-Pesa product is not designed for large amounts of money. You can do large transactions on M-Pesa, even on an international basis. So this is for people who are sending money home in small amounts of money who can't really afford the sort of major money transfer companies. Our product is distinguished from the other brands that you don't have to go to a bank, you go to an M-Pesa store or you go to a Western Union store. And we will soon be seeing M-Pesa stores on the high street of the UK where Kenyans living in the UK can go in and send money home.
Safaricom's success is just that, making its product offering small and affordable enough for almost any consumer to purchase.
If you look back over the last few years, you need to indigenize your products. You cannot assume just because it worked in South Africa or it worked somewhere else, you can just drop it in here and it's going to work. It's not. You've got to consider the local side of things. You've got to consider what resonates with the people here. You need to indigenize your brand. And then I think the lesson across sub-Saharan Africa is you need to small size also. You need to be able to sell, Safaricom last week announced they're selling a 5 bob credit for the phone. 5 bob is what? It's less than 10 US cents. I mean, people would say, well, there cannot be any sense in that. But there is, and Africa is about making everything bite-sized for the consumer. But you can be sure there is an enormous market once you do that.
Over 2/3 of Kenyans over the age of 15 own a cell phone, but only 8 to 9% have access to the internet. And for the biggest company by market cap on the NSE, its growth won't be acquisitive or through regional expansion. The onset of the Seacom fiber optic cable has meant that the future earning potential of Safaricom lies in data. Proceeds from Safaricom's 5-year 12 billion Kenyan shilling bond, the first tranche of which was 50% oversubscribed, is going to be invested in this.
The proceeds of the bond will be used for capital expansion of our network, to expand our data network. Particularly, we're spending it on our WiMAX network and on our 3G network. We don't see that we're going to use the proceeds for any acquisitions in the near term.
Seacom means big prospects for Kenya's ICT sector.
18 months ago, we did not have a single international gateway on ICT. Now we have 2. We expect to have 3 by the end of next year. We shall be the most connected country internationally on the African continent, up from 0.
For the NSE's first ICT-listed company, Access Kenya, Seacom not only means a 55% cost reduction for clients, it also means things have got a whole lot more competitive.
The competitive space has totally changed. We used to be in a nice niche called the ISP business where we would be competing with other data providers. Obviously, now a lot of the GSM companies have also moved into data. Safaricom, Zain, and even Orange have moved into the data space. So they would be competing more on the 3G, what we call the mobility network, mobility type of data. We're still competing, or we're still providing services more on the fixed data. So it's a bit of a different market. They're going for mass market, and for us, on the lowest end of the market, which is residential, we're still going for the high end of the residential of the market. So there's actually a thin line, but there's still a distinguished difference between the kind of the part of the market niche that we're going for and what they're going for. So we still complement each other. A lot of clients would start off with a Safaricom 3G modem, and when they want to upgrade, they'll actually move to a WiMAX system, fixed network from Access Kenya.
Entrepreneur Nicholas Nesbitt returned to Kenya after spending 2 decades in the United States. He saw potential in Kenya's ICT industry back in the day when voice over IP was illegal. Looking for a viable investment, he set up the country's first contact center, KenCall. Over the years, he's seen the rewards of not only getting into the market early, but with the arrival of Seacom, he's looking at taking on some global players.
When we were offering international clients communication over satellite, they were very hesitant to commit. But now with Seacom, we're now running tests with some very large insurance companies in the States who we could never have spoken to or gone this far. We've brought on 2 clients from the UK, we have more in the wings, and suddenly we're at a technical playing field that's on par with anyone anywhere in the world.
Kenya might be small fry in the business process outsourcing space right now, but this is one sector which won't be left hanging in the years to come.
This has the makings of a very large industry. It's estimated that worldwide it's a $12 billion industry, and this is not an amount to be ignored.
Kenya's ICT industry is testament to the opportunities and enterprising nature of its people, but it's not for investors interested in only short-term gains.
You're walking into people that might be operating in a smaller pond, but it doesn't mean that their ability to swim is any much less. It's just that the market is a whole lot smaller. When I came here, I had experience of working at the largest corporations and going to the best schools, and I thought I was coming in to save Kenya, save Africa. And a lot of the people who are well entrenched basically said, stand in line, young man, wait and earn your stripes. And it was a real lesson. And I think a lot of the companies that come in here thinking that they carry a very big brand on a very large business card, therefore they know a lot more, but that's not the case. Come in wisely, come in humbly, come in and make sure that you're in there for the long term. Nobody respects Johnny come lately who's going to be a 1 or 2 year wonder. Come in, plant your roots, bring in the right people that you need to, and be in here for the long term. And if you do that, you'll become very successful.